Uh, Welcome in today. Uh, we have another update on how things have been going so far with the race to land Kerbals on the moons. Antlers 1, publicly referred to as Racmos 1, uh, was a spy satellite we had in orbit of Kerbin. It was launched during the previous report window. Our previous report discussed the launch, but to recap, due to the UCCR's limited digital camera technology, film cameras were chosen instead. This meant the film canisters would have to be deorbited and physically recovered for the photos to be viewed. The plan was to use the same deorbit and recovery procedures as the Vostok capsule the satellite was based on. However, a day after our last report, the parachute that was supposed to be installed on Antlers 1 was discovered still in its warehouse on Kerbin. It is still not clear at this time how this happened, but we suspect sabotage. Regardless, this meant a manned mission would need to be sent up in order to retrieve the film. The Voskhard program was thus pulled out of retirement for one last mission. A week before Voskhard 5 launched, and a few days before Antlers 1 was originally intended to deorbit, Antlers 1 was intercepted by an Allied Territorial Federation satellite. The enemy satellite, publicly known as Finder 3, was initially believed to be harmless. Even if the satellite secretly contained an astronaut, as we now believe it did, the ATF were thought to be far away from catching up to UCCR's EVA capabilities. We did not believe there was anything the ATF could do to one of our satellites without deorbiting or without destroying or forcibly deorbiting them. Since Antlers 1 was undamaged and its orbit unaltered, didn't believe they had done anything to it. Of course, when the crew of Voskhard 5 reached Antlers 1 in orbit to retrieve its photographs, realized that Finder 3 had in fact tampered with it after all. And thus, for now, future spy satellite operations have been paused until we can figure out an effective counter to ATF tampering. Or at least until our video camera technology advances. Although, even still, I don't like that they can just go up there and intercept them. Not great. The ATF broadcasted the launch of Dioscuri 6 on public television. After circularizing its orbit, the broadcast switched to a camera mounted on the outside of the capsule, marking the first live video broadcast from space. The astronaut on board, Ronald Kerman, then exited the capsule and demonstrated the use of an EVA jetpack, confirming that they had somehow caught up to our own jetpack technology earlier than expected. The ATF claims this was their first orbital test of their jetpack, but we believe it was really first used to steal the film from the Antlers 1. Due to mistimed firing of the descent engines, Minhart 4 was unable to decelerate to a safe velocity before impacting the surface of Minmus. Sadly, the lander violently impacted the surface of the moon. Contact was lost, and the lander was believed to have been completely destroyed. Miraculously, however, contact was regained shortly after. Systems data indicated the majority of the lander and its science experiments were heavily damaged, but the probe core, antenna, and micrometeorite detector just barely survived. Despite the overall failure, it was still the first Kerbal-made object to impact Minmus, and it did send back data for at least one of its intended experiments. Sadly, on day 320 of the second year, Jebediah Kerman was killed in a crash while attempting to land an experimental spaceplane. The La-2 is a military project intended to address the shortcomings of current UCCR ICBMs and long-range bombers, those being a relative lack of accuracy and long delivery time, respectively. The design sought to solve these problems by replacing the upper stage of a rocket with a small piloted bomber. The plane would re-enter the atmosphere near its target, then the pilot would fly the plane the final distance to target. ensuring good aim, before flying back home under jet power. The Law 2 so far has been tested with science equipment in its Bombay to help supplement development costs with science contracts. It was during one of these test flights that Jebediah lost his life. After experiencing an engine failure, Jeb was forced to turn around early and land back in the UCCR. A large, flat grass field was chosen as his landing zone. Unfortunately, Jebediah came in too quickly. The rear landing gear bounced off the ground, sending the craft nose first into the terrain and completely destroying the cockpit. Jebediah Kerman had a career full of accomplishments. He was the most skilled test pilot in the UCCR's Air Force. He was the first Kerbal in space and the first to orbit Kerbin. He is perhaps the most famous Kerbal in the entire world. He will be missed dearly by all. Rest in peace, Jebediah. Of course, we must march on. Just over 2 weeks later, Minhart 5 successfully landed softly on Minmus, the first to ever do so. It was able to carry out the whole suite of experiments Minhart 4 had originally been intended to perform, and, unlike previous landers, was also equipped with a digital camera. After touching down, it sent back the first photo from the surface of another celestial body, as seen here. Hot on our trail, the ATF launched Examiner 1 and 2 back-to-back at night, aiming to land on Minmus and the Moon, respectively. While Examiner 1 crashed into the surface of Minmus due to an engine failure, Examiner 2 landed on the surface of the Moon only 3 days after Minhart 5 landed on Minmus. Since our moon lander, Minhart 5, was not equipped with a camera, the ATF was able to nab 3 firsts. First close-up photo of the moon's surface from orbit, shown on the right, and the first photo from the moon's surface, shown on the left. The latter also happens to be the first photo of Kerbin from the surface of another celestial body. The Voskhod spacecraft was once again pulled out of retirement, this time to perform the mission type it is most known for, a rescue. Previously, Voskhod had been used to rescue 2 ATF astronauts who had been stranded in space on 2 separate missions. These rescues had only been carried out because the ATF at the time lacked the ability to perform their own rescue missions. This made us, those astronauts' only hope at survival, and thus justified our missions to the international community. However, since then, the ATF have demonstrated everything required for them to perform their own rescues in the future. Any further attempts to bring astronauts to the UCCR would be seen as abduction. Since our own safety measures make it extremely unlikely that we will ever strand another Kerbal in space, no more rescues were prepared for, and the Voskhod was retired. That was until the ATF launched Dice-Scurry 7. While Dice-Scurry missions typically carry 2 astronauts, they are sometimes launched with only 1 to make room for additional equipment in the cabin, as was the case for Dice-Scurry 7. Piloted by Thumpton Kerman, shortly after circularizing his orbit, Thumpton opened his visor to have a snack when his capsule suddenly depressurized, killing him. At least, that's what the ATF Mission Control believed. In reality, Thumpton had sabotaged his own capsule and faked his death. CGB, CCR's top intelligence agency, had secretly been in communication with Thumpton, who wanted to defect to the UCCR. While the ATF believed he had died, Voskhod 6 launched to bring him back to Kerbin. To hide the nature of our mission, officially, Voskhod 6 was simply a training mission. Our newest pilot, Ellery Kerman, needed experience and would be flying into orbit with veteran cosmonaut Valentina Kerman. While the ATF would no doubt track our flight and know we rendezvoused with Dice-Scurry 7, with 2 Kerbals already on board the 2-seat capsule, they would have to think we were just taking the opportunity to investigate. Of course, Ellery Kerman would not actually fly on this mission. Instead, Valentina would be sent up with an ATF spacesuit sitting in the seat next to her. We still had the suits left over from when we rescued the first 2 astronauts, so we filled one of them with a dummy. After rendezvousing with Thumpton, he walked over to the Voskhod, and Valentina placed the dummy in the Dice-Scurry capsule. The door was jammed shut, and the parachute sabotaged, so that the ATF wouldn't be able to recover the now fake body. The 2 safely landed back in the KSC, where a CGB team was waiting to recover them. Thumpton was swapped out with Ellerick, and the former was taken into debrief with the CGB. He was cleared to join our space program shortly after. His identity obscured with a name change, a new background, and a haircut. He is now Thompson Kerman, a Cervid Kerbal born in the Eastern Peninsula. Now, if Voskhart finally retired, for real this time, a proper replacement was introduced. The Stato program will be our new manned spacecraft. Designed to allow significantly longer duration missions, the Stato features large retractable solar panels, more powerful antennas, a larger airlock that doubles as an extra crew and storage space, and docking ports that allow internal crew transfer. Stato 1 and 2 were launched a day apart, but both experienced engine failures. Thankfully, their new, more powerful RCS allowed both vessels to finish circularizing their orbits. Stato 2 deorbited, while Stato 1 stayed in space. The crew of Stato 2 went back up 2 weeks later aboard Stato 3 with spare parts to replace the first mission's engines. After docking, Bill Kerman performed a spacewalk and repaired the faulty engine, the first ever EVA repair. He then took a few photos with a handheld camera before returning to the capsule. Bill and Bob, launching on Stato 3 and 1 respectively, then passed through the docking ports and swapped seats, the first crew transfer in space without a spacewalk. The crews stayed docked together, orbiting Kerbin for 4 weeks before returning, setting a new record for longest duration crewed spaceflight. While Stato 1 had another engine failure while beginning its orbit burn, Bill was able to repair it again and complete the burn. Stato 3, which launched with an already improved engine over Stato 1 and 2, deorbited without incident. All 4 Kerbals returned safely, but additional testing is needed to make the landing location more predictable after the orbital and service modules are detached. The Stato 1 crew overshot their landing site, and while Stato 3 undershot. Making up for the failure of Examiner 1, the ATF successfully landed Examiner 3 on the surface of Minmus and returned photographs. On a similar note, we have made up for our own past failure. The Law 2B was successfully demonstrated to Cuban Prime Minister Fidel Kerman. The Prime Minister was waiting at a military base on the east side of Cuba. The launch was broadcasted to him, and less than 15 minutes later, Thompson Kerman flew over the base and landed the plane in a nearby field. Impressed by our capabilities, Fidel Kerman has granted the Cervid government access to Cuban military bases. Now that the design has been proven, the La 2B will be handed over to the Cervid Air Force for testing with bombs. The spaceplane will also remain available to Dear Cosmos for scientific missions if needed. A few weeks after solidifying our relations with Cuba, another military alliance has formed on the other side of the globe. Well, kind of. They're all over the globe, really. The nations of the ATF, Great Britain, Deutschland, Canada, France, and Kurti have come together to form CATO, the Caribbean Allied Treaty Organization. While these nations were allied before, they are now entered into a formal pact requiring all member states to go to war if any one of them is attacked. This makes it impossible for any one nation to stand against their combined military strength. To combat this potential threat, the nations of Bulgaria, Cuba, Kongao, Kolska, Komania, the UCCR, and Kesko-Slovenska have founded our own military alliance, the Warsaw Pact. Our brave nations stand together, and any attack on any of us will be an attack on all of us. Here we have an updated world map. Romania, Bulgaria, and Kesko-Slovenska join our allies with the creation of the Warsaw Pact. Canada was previously tentative about aligning itself with the ATF, but after Great Britain joined CATO, Canada followed suit. North and South Vietnam are currently not in either pact due to being actively at war already. Still, North Vietnam remains allied with the Warsaw Pact as a non-member, and South Vietnam remains allied with CATO as a non-member. The front line has moved further north slightly as both sides continue to send aid. French troops have all but pulled out of the region, but ATF soldiers have been deployed in their place, and in greater numbers. Concau continues to provide both equipment and troops to the north. Updating our goals, we have, of course, managed to finally get to that successful rendezvous and dock of 2 spacecraft. And while we don't have a proper, true satellite network, our existing network of satellites is sufficient enough that we have effectively eliminated all communications blackouts within the Kerbal system. So that's great. We, of course, have added on here our goals of putting a rover on both Minmus and the moon. And that is all we have for today.